Product provided by Nintendo. Monolith blew me away. What else can I say? They took a top 10 game of all time for me and made it better. I think X Definitive Edition is in my top 3 of all time now. And not just Xenoblade, overall. And there is so much to talk about because this game was a 10-year plus cook. And I kinda just want to talk about why I love Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, specifically Chapter 13 so much, and why I love this story direction. And I was actually kind of agonizing. Okay, maybe agonizing is a bit of a strong word, but I couldn't decide how I wanted to start this series of videos about Xenoblade X, Chapter 13, and theory crafting for the future. I couldn't remember. I couldn't figure out where to begin. And after getting my emotional, blast out in the last Xenoblade video, let's cover Chapter 13 in general, why I like it so much, and various things that I picked up. And I want to theme this video around a central idea. This was a cook. This was a cook by Monolith and Takahashi over the course of 10 plus years. And if it wasn't, here's my thing. If it wasn't, they are the best at improv that I've ever seen in the industry. There's a few notions I have seen here and there that I want to push back on. One, that all of this came out of nowhere. It feels like that initially, but if you go back throughout Xenoblade X and its story, on a first playthrough, it is easy to have missed, all the foreshadowing. But if you go back, there are tons, and I mean tons of foreshadowing in pretty much every chapter. It's actually crazy. I had played Xenoblade X on the Wii U for a full playthrough, which I hadn't actually done before, about a year and a half before Definitive Edition actually came out. So, for the most part, I was rather fresh, and I remembered most of the lore because I have Xenoblade Brain Rot. So when I played through Definitive Edition, there's just so many lines of dialogue that happen not just in the main story, but in side content, that I'm like, wait, whoa, we're foreshadowing this?
We don't need to be from the same species to be able to recognize our common ground. Someone told me that once.
That was a lifetime ago. That's quite a memory you have.
Wait, whoa. I think part of the reason I have grown and just fallen in love even more with Xenoblade X, especially with Definitive Edition, is because of a simple design philosophy that threads itself throughout the entire fabric of this game. You get more out of it the more you're willing to put in. In Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, if you just play the main story and largely ignore or you do minimal amounts of side content, you will get most of the world building for those games. You'll have largely a firm grasp and a deep development for pretty much most of the main characters, but also especially the world, and that is not the formula of X. X was always the odd one out. It played differently, felt differently, looked differently, and the vibes were completely different. But when it comes to X, if you just play the main story, and what is required for the completion of the main story, you'll get a decent amount of world building and character development for a couple of characters, right? Especially when it concerns Chapter 13, we'll get to that. But, in my opinion, where X really truly shines is when you dive deep into the side content and you're willing to do pretty much everything. Because again, back to that old adage I was just talking about, the more you're willing to put into Xenoblade X, the more the game is willing to give you. If you want to love the world of Mirror, if you want to immerse yourself in these characters, the game gives you ample opportunity to do so, you just have to go out and seek it. I think this can be best shown and encapsulated through the affinity quests. For me at least, the first affinity quest for most of the characters, especially the side characters, are nothing particularly special. Characters can often come off as one-dimensional or hollow, and just not that engaging or exciting. But for me at least, it's when I partook in the second and third affinity quests for these characters that I fell in love with the entirety of the cast. I haven't done all of them yet, particularly Murderesses, but for the ones that I've done, which is the majority of the cast, even if I wasn't particularly enthused by a character initially, I eventually fell in love with them. And for me, I would put the cast of Xenoblade X right there alongside the cast of Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, for engaging characters that I care about and want to see more of. I think this is particularly important for Chapter 13 and why I love Chapter 13 so much, because it directly works off that development you have put into the game up to that point in time, because the world of Mirror is threatened. and you come to the conclusion rather quickly that the world of Mira is essentially doomed and humanity will have to just scram and skedaddle away again. The beginning of the game is essentially replaying itself, where humanity, where they once believed to be home, is now under threat and they have to leave. So we get to partake in Project Exodus, we get to partake in the creation of the White Whale 2 in Chapter 13. My opinion, Chapter 13 is one of the greatest sections of any video game I've ever played. I love it so much, there's a couple of problems with it, but for me they're rather minor in comparison to the enjoyment and the excitement I got out of Chapter 13. I am someone who has played Xenoblade X to some degree for the better part of 9 to 10 years. I think the game wasn't out 10 years ago, so I'm gonna say 9. And while I didn't beat the game all those years ago, because I had a massive issue just actually beating games back then, I still loved the game, and it was memorable to me. And I roughly knew what happened because I spoiled myself. When I beat the game in its entirety, at least in terms of main story, with that recent stream playthrough about 1.5 to 2 years ago, I fell in love with the game even more. Chapter 13 hits you like a gut punch, but I think it's absolutely a deliberate effect by Monolith here. They want you to feel the emotions that the characters themselves are feeling. Humanity, and you yourself believed, especially, right? Especially if you were a longtime Xenoblade X player. If you loved X so much, you viewed Mira to be essentially like a home in a game. It was one of the most unique and enthralling and engaging worlds I've ever seen put to a video game. In that way, it did feel like a home. But in Chapter 13, when we finally get brand new story content that is major for Xenoblade X, after all these years of thinking they forgot about X or just didn't care about it anymore, like a bolt from the blue, it's brought back, and then immediately when you get to that new story content, they're taking Mira away from you again. And look, initially I was like, whoa, okay, like I kind of get it, but I love Mira a lot. I don't think I want to see it go. I want to learn about these mysteries. I want to learn about other continents on the world of Mira. What other mysteries does this world have that we can learn about? I love Mira. I don't particularly want to see it go. And they use that emotional effect to great advantage, in my opinion, because the story of Xenoblade is the story of humanity, just from different perspectives. And Chapter 13 has a lot. It will be a popular thing that goes around, and I can see it already, because I talked about it a lot on stream when I was playing it, that all this is happening in the confines of one chapter. And yes, when you compare, like, say, one chapter and you view the worth of one chapter through the lens of chapters 1 through 12, where technically not too much plot actually happened for a lot of those chapters, and they go by rather quick, Chapter 13 has a ton in it. And while the actual playtime may not be, like, that long in the grand scheme of things, in my opinion, I think Chapter 13 has about as much plot development. That's well paced, by the way, but it has about as much plot development as chapters 1 through 12 does. It's an insane amount because it's broken up into 3 different acts, each act being way more meaty than an individual chapter from chapters 1 through 12, in my opinion, outside of maybe chapters 11 or 12. But even then, I would still give the edge over Chapter 13, just in terms of the amount of stuff that happens there, the amount of character development, the amount of world building, the amount of reveals. I know I've talked about this before, and I know I'm going to say it many times in the future, and my apologies if this gets a bit repetitious or tedious. I love Chapter 13. I cannot overstate that enough. It is some of the best pacing, some of the best story development, some of the best characterization I've ever seen from Monolith, bearing in mind, each of the games Monolith have put out is in like top 20 games of all time conversation for me. There's like layers to this, dude. And now that a few days have passed since I actually beat Chapter 13, I've only grown to appreciate that emotional effect Chapter 13 has on the player, where it tries to put you in the shoes of your MC, in the shoes of humanity, being forced to relocate from Mira again and losing another home, emphasizing with Elma, where this is her 3rd time losing someplace she wanted to protect. To the same groups, dude. It's always been the Ganglion and Void and the Ghosts. Time and time and time again. We get so much development, not just for Elma and her backstory, with beautiful artwork in the background to showcase just snippets of these locations, and I absolutely love that artwork. It's very Xenoblade 3, but Xenoblade X is some of my favorite examples of like sci-fi done right for me, or that just specifically appeals to me. I love the aesthetic, I love the vibe, I love the tone, I love the atmosphere, I love everything about it. And if I have to become the biggest Xenoblade X glazer on this website, then I absolutely will take up that banner and lead the charge. Buddy, I haven't even talked about Al yet. Monolith, how can you do this to me? You can't just casually shadow drop a top 3 character in the franchise for me like this. Needless to say, I love the character of Al, and I think he goes to show one of Monolith's greatest strengths, and I talked about this a lot on stream, because it was apparent and self-evident to me right out the gate. Monolith masters at characterization. I fell in love with his character immediately. I memed him up a bunch on stream because I find that fun, but I did fall in love with the character, but also the interactions and the dynamics between Al and the rest of the cast. And very quickly and early on into chapter 13, it felt like Al was always there from the beginning for me. And honestly, I can't imagine the cast of Xenoblade X without Al anymore. He fits like a glove in my opinion. How's it popping? I love that joke because it works for the character of Al. Like, you hear it initially and you're like, alright, what's so special about this? And he keeps hopping in on it, and the characters start to warm up to it, and I grew to warm up to it as well. And like, I made an entire video about how I almost threw up at that final, like, how's it poppin' when we could say that to Al when we're in the Ares Prime, piloting it against Void himself. Dude, Xenoblade X is just roller cool, done so well. Oh my god, it's so good! And my biggest concern when it came to the character of Al is that the MC, Cross, would be put on the sidelines in favor of Al, and that happens a little bit early on, but like, then you just get his affinity missions, and they just develop this big bro bond filled with bro energy between Al and like MC, and it's so good. You go from having a 1v1, which for me happened in like the middle of a rainstorm on the fields of Primordia, and it was just picture perfect. And then it's like, okay, pizza side quest. And I loved it. I loved how we were able to have a little bit of downtime in a story that is so constant, so high adrenaline, and so emotional as well. We were able to take a step back and remind ourselves, this is Xenoblade X. We can have these downtimes, we can have these moments of levity, and these moments of characterization that shows you how these characters operate during a bit of peacetime or relaxation. It adds dimensions to these characters and makes them far more likable to me than if it was just a constant stream of emotion, 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 and tension. And I grew not to just like the character of Al, I fell in love with the character of Al. And also, the dynamic between Al and the hero, MC, works so well. At the beginning of Xenoblade X, we're not around. We haven't crash landed yet, we haven't really made a name for ourselves. But humanity only really has one hero. You can kind of also count Elma, but for the purposes of what I'm about to talk about, humanity only has the one. They have Al. He's the one that everyone, including Elma, points to when they need something done. He's the final Hail Mary attempt for humanity, essentially. But it goes to show that humanity came out of Mira stronger, forming new bonds with the other alien races, like the Manon, like the Nopon, like the Bug People, like everyone else, but also humanity themselves became stronger because now no longer do they only have the one hero, Al, they now also have you, the player, Cross. And it goes to show that while humanity may have lost their home again, they lost New LA, they lost Mira, we all came out of it more together and stronger at the end to find a new world at the very end of Xenoblade X. Chapter 13 in Definitive Edition. I love the symbolism, I love the message, I love the themes of Xenoblade X, and I particularly love the themes in Chapter 13 so much. And I was blown away by how they actually addressed a lot of the actual plot threads that were left hanging with the plot cliffhanger of Chapter 12 back in the original Xenoblade X version on the Wii U. I was of the opinion that there was no conceivable way you could address everything in a future connected style story add-on for Xenoblade X. You would need a Xenoblade X 2, and I was proven wrong by Monolith. Yeah, my opinion, Monolith proved me wrong. They addressed everything that I wanted them to. And sure, some people will have mixed reactions and responses to the idea that it wasn't necessarily Mira that was so special, it was just the planet. It was something about the world of the universe, of the multiverse, that was. But I grabbed onto that explanation rather quickly, because I liked the way that it was utilized. I liked the way that Xenoblade X and Monolith brought it all together. The scene where we had the flashbacks with Al, where he pretty much had to play Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, which I found funny. Look, you know me, I will talk about like every little detail in Chapter 13 at some point. We'll talk about the multiverse, we'll talk about... There's just so much to talk about. Oh my god, theory craft. I have to make an entire video as well about the Bible quote. You know what? Screw it. We're gonna do it live right now. Okay, everyone, welcome to Bible study with Jmulls. I love this kind of stuff because it shows the attention to detail that Monolith and Takahashi has when it comes to the series, but also Chapter 13 and just Xenoblade X on the whole. I am not of the opinion that this stuff comes out of thin air. I mean, hell, the ghosts were there in the original Xenoblade X in the intro cutscene, right? Like, they were just there. We just didn't address them. And also, you saw Al in the post-credit scene of the original Xenoblade X. He just had the black, like, hoodie on, and we called him the Black Knight for the longest time in the community. It just turned out to be Al. I'm of the opinion this stuff was all planned out, because it feels like that to me. But Elma said the following in Chapter 13.
And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying, to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. Sound familiar?
This comes from the Book of Revelations in the Bible, chapter 9, verses 13 to 15. Though I haven't found the exact translation that one comes from. But if you read the entire chapter, Revelations 9, and you know a lot about Xenoblade lore, and especially Xenoblade X lore, there's a lot of interesting and cool comparisons you can make here. And you know what? We're gonna run it. I'll leave a link in the description to the website I'm using, by the way. But Revelation 9 goes, for this translation at least, the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. Kinda sounds like the conduit to me. Which was also talked about in Chapter 13. Oh my god, I digress. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it, like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. One of the key visuals of the ghosts in Chapter 13, but also just in Xenoblade X overall, are like those long processions, those long lines of the ghost-like skulls. The imagery seems to be trying to compare those guys to locusts as well to me. And the smoke is the giant black ball DMAT events they come from. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Remember that one cutscene when we first saw what the ghost could do in Chapter 13. The DMAT events themselves may dematerialize the earth and the plants and all that, but the ghosts? They specifically turn people into dust. They didn't harm the trees or the plants of the earth or anything like that. They were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months, and the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. Yeah, those people's death was rather brutal. During those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. That is the story of Void. Also, maybe a bit of Lao earlier on in his story. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle, because they look like skulls. On their heads, they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth was like lion's teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle, because it sounded like a bunch of skulls going into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, and in their tails, they had power to torment people for 5 months. They had as king over them the Angel of the Abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon, that is, Destroyer. I imagine that is probably referring to the leader of the ghosts we have yet to learn about. The first woe is past. 2 other woes are yet to come. And one of the big themes we always deal about in Xenoblade is contending with the past and learning to grow and move on from it. But also especially in X, Lao could not escape from the past, losing his family to all of Project Exodus. People hadn't, gone over losing the Earth. Because why would they? It had been too soon. The 6th angel sounded his trumpet. This is where Elma kicks in. But in this translation specifically, it reads, the 6th angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the 4 horns of the golden altar that is before God. It said to the 6th angel, who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. I'm not too certain about this next part of my analysis, by the way, way, but look, I'm spitballing here largely. Let me know your own thoughts in the comments down below. Third part of men, the first part were those who remained on the Earth when it was split by Klaus, the second part is those who remained on the outside in Xenosaga, and the third part is the White Will crew from another universe. Or, could also be like perceived to be like the first part was the people from Xenoblade 1, second part the people from Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 3 is just the combination of those people together, so ignore that, and the third part of men is the White Will crew. Could the sixth angel be Klaus? Could the four horns also be like Numa, Logos, and Ontos, because Ontos was 2? They specifically call out in the game, like right after Elma yaps about this, that the ghosts are probably the angels. But what's the meaning of the 4? Great River Euphrates is where the ghosts come from. That's probably like what lies beyond a DMAT event, because when you fly into it in-game in Chapter 13, you just take a bunch of damage, and it's an invisible wall. Well, not invisible, but you know what I mean. The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. There's a lot of ghosts. Like a lot. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. Reminds me personally of, say, Ontos, Numa, and Logos, with those colorations specifically. Yellow being a bit of an odd one out, but like maybe Mithra, or like maybe I'm just blind and there's like some yellow stuff going on with Numa. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. This one reminds me of the imagery used for the destruction of Elma's world, the Earth, and then Mira. Elma's world, there was specifically imagery shown of it being on fire. The Earth pretty much, from the imagery used, blew the hell up, so that's where the sulfur comes in. And then Mira, and especially New LA, were destroyed in DMAT events, and we've already made the connection between the DMAT events and smoke earlier on in this analysis of this Bible chapter. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes having heads with which they inflict injury. The rest of mankind, who were not killed by these plagues, still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshipping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood, idols that cannot see or hear or walk, nor did they repent of their murders, their magic arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts. I would need to think a bit more on that final bit there, but like, you can see how like the more you dive into this chapter specifically, the more connections you can draw between the rest of Xenoblade X. And also the series on the whole, in a way. I find this stuff fascinating personally, just because it goes to show just how well thought out a lot of this stuff is. So I will always push back on the idea that Chapter 13 came out of nowhere, or anything like that. One, it's a bit of an intended effect, because humanity felt like they finally had a home, they finally fought to live peacefully, or at least as close to that as they possibly can on Mira, only for it to be taken away. That's a bit of an intended effect, as we talked about before. But also, I think a good amount of this had been foreshadowed. We just didn't deal with the ghosts throughout chapters 1 through 12 of Xenoblade X. They were bound to make an appearance. They deliberately left, like, Alma's partner being Al as a mystery, alongside the tandem Skell. They showed us Al and Lau on the beach at the end of Xenoblade X in the original as well. I'm kinda glad they kept Lau dead, by the way. I think it just felt more emotional and impactful because of that. I think Chapter 13 was a good blend between, like, unpredictability, but also building up on, like, previous mystery and foreshadowing in interesting ways, because there are elements of this that I did call. And is my ego over the moon, despite the fact I made like 15 different theories and one of them kind of stuck? Yes, absolutely. Will I run with it permanently? Yes. But I mean, I did call the fact that they would probably bring Xenoblade X into the canon of Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, and then when people shouted at me saying they can't do that, the lore doesn't match up, I could just say, and I did say, that, oh, Xenoblade 2 already told you directly there's a freaking multiverse, like Klaus says this, different universes. He said this back in Xenoblade 2, and I said, if you want to make X canon or in the same, like, universe or timeline of Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, all you have to do is say that in one of those worlds, one of those universes, resides the people in the timeline of X. I even talked about before how when humanity was fleeing Earth, it's entirely possible that they jumped to a different universe and they just didn't properly identify what was going on, because Xenoblade X chapters 1 through 12 was built on the idea that we really didn't know anything about what was happening. Everything was still a mystery. And I was saying for the longest time, the story of Xenoblade X was predicated. It was built on the foundation that we didn't know anything. Like, that was the ending of the original game. It was everything we knew and that we thought we knew and understood turned out to be wrong or grossly misunderstood. So all the plot reveals and twists that they did made logical sense to me. And going back to the top of this video, this was a 10-year cook, people. Yeah, we finally are circling back around to this. Think of the release order of Xenoblade X. This is what makes it feel so intended to me. This is what brings it all home to me. And when I realized this, I just sat back in my chair going, damn, they're brilliant. Xenoblade 1 comes out, right? Then you come out with Xenoblade X, which feels completely different and separate, because it is, to Xenoblade 1. In terms of, like, well, everything. Aesthetic, tone, gameplay, world, storytelling, timeline, lore, everything. And then you come out with Xenoblade 2, which is directly connected to Xenoblade 1, and then you do Xenoblade 3, which connects 1, 2 with 3 as well, and then X feels like the odd man out. It's the odd duck. It's quack, quack, quacking away, but it's separated from the rest of the group. And people just go, well, it's completely different. Oh, it's completely separate. Oh, they forgot about it. And then they come out with Future Redeemed, which gets the cast of Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 onto one new world at the end of Future Redeemed. And then we see a light in the corner, which resembles Cosmos because it, like, looks like the ending of Xenosaga 3. But then they come out with Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. Oh, this odd man out from all those years ago, the second entry in the series. Oh, cool, let's go back to that game. We're getting new story, cool. I wonder what they're going to do with it. Oh, okay. So this was the glue that ties everything in together. It was all connected, just with a bit of separation. And at the end of it all, at the end of this grouping of games, the game that was the odd man out ends it all with a return to tie it all together and give you context as to probably what that other light dot at the end of Future Redeemed probably was. It was probably the White Whale 2. I've talked about the freaking rings on the planet before, by the way, and it just feels so poetic to me that it's the game that for the longest time felt forgotten, felt like the odd man out, was the one to end it all. At least for this, like, era of Xenoblade. Before, like, Xenoblade 4 or, like, Xenoblade Saga, whatever they call it, most likely picks up on this new planet, either immediately or at some point in the future. It's like the stories of Xenoblade 1, 2, 3 into Future Redeemed, and then X tells the story of the creation and the formation and the population of the setting for Xenoblade from here on out. It's been one giant 10-plus year cook, if not even longer, if we want to go back to the release date of Xenoblade 1 instead of using the release date of Xenoblade X. Heck, in that way, you could call it a 15-year cook. If not longer, it might be more like 16. Who knows, I can't count. I just love how they executed on this. I just love how they took one of my favorite games, brought it back, made it so much better, and also made it so much more important, and the glue that ties everything together. And at the end of it all, we get to have an Al moment from the beginning of the game, where he used the Ares Prime to, like, defend the White Whale so that we could get to Mira. We used, like, a Temu Skell to pretty much defend the White Whale too so that it can gather energy because of the Ares Prime with Al. And we defend it long enough to allow them to build up the required energy to initiate the jump. But we make it back in one piece as well. Al's glazing us in the background. Everyone's waiting for bated breath. I love that scene so freaking much. I love Xenoblade X. And we still have so much to talk about. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment down below with who your favorite party member was. And if it was like one of the main ones like Elmo or Lynn, tell me someone else who was your favorite to use. I like using Al, Neil Nail, and Mia. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.